How many of us broadcast engineers have learned by on-the-job training? Have you had a mentor, though, maybe? Or did you do it all yourself? Well, Chris Wygal is the engineer and ops manager for a network of stations in Virginia and shares with us the tricks he's learned himself for on-location sports production and for broadcast studios. This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Direct Current Broadcasting Newsletter. Get Direct Current in your inbox every Thursday with technical pointers putting you and your facility at an advantage. By BSW, Broadcast Supply Worldwide, where March is microphone mania. Low mic bundle prices that can't be repeated. And by Lavo and the Crystal Clear Virtual Radio Console. Crystal Clear is the console with a multi-touch touchscreen interface. Welcome into This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack. Glad you're here. This is the show where we talk about everything about radio technology, audio, like from the microphone to the light bulb at the top of the tower. And on this show, we're going to really talk about microphones and microphone audio technology that is making them sound good, as well as other studio audio considerations. And we have a guest coming up for that. His name is Chris Wygal. He'll be with us in just a minute. But first of all, let's see. Let me get the disclaimers out of the way. I'm Kirk. I work for the Telos Alliance, and they graciously allow me to do this show at the end of the day, working time. And they even sponsor the show, so that's, give them a hat tip for that. And so I'm a broadcast engineer myself. So welcome in. Maybe I know what I'm talking about a little bit. I've been doing it for a while. Haven't to shock myself too many times. Now with a guy who's probably never shocked himself because he's so careful. From the New York City area, it's Chris Tobin. Welcome in, Chris. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I may not shock myself, but I do shock people. Anyway, it's amazing the things he will say in public. No, never mind. I'm really kidding. I'm doing well. This is good. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that last week bandwidth was not your forte, but that's okay. You're on holiday with the family, so it's important. Yeah,
it worked out. We had it turned out we kind of had some real estate to attend to, and anyway, it was just best that we didn't. So great. Chris, what's your disclaimer, and how's the weather today?
My disclaimer is I'm employed by a public radio station. I am an independent person that does a lot of things. I'm actually working with an engineering firm and working on a couple of projects that involve, let's see, IP video, microwave wireless, and some fiber optics. So it's pretty cool. That's all I can say. I can't say where the location is and what the project is at the moment because it's still in the wraps, but it's a fun project. And the weather here in Newark, New Jersey, just across the river from the Big Apple, it's a cloudy white day. It's kind of windy, very windy. Actually, gusts are about 14 miles an hour, and you can get lifted off your feet if you're not careful, not paying attention to your balance. It's pretty wild weather, and the temperature is actually around 32. Yesterday it was 58.
What?
Today it's 32. Yes.
We had yesterday and the day before, we had 2 days in a row of thunderstorms roll through Middle Tennessee. And it was a little bit wicked, hail damage and things like that. And for those of you who, I don't know, a lot of our listeners and viewers here on this show are my friends on Facebook. And on my Facebook page, I put some video taken with a drone of the approaching thunderstorm. And I got some lightning and just got, actually, if I lived on top of one of the hills in my neighborhood, I would have the same view, but I don't. I live in a valley. And so I never get to see the thunderstorm approaching from afar. And so I popped the drone up a couple hundred feet, looked over the next hill to the west, to the northwest, and got a view of the thunderstorm coming in. So I put a little music to it. And if you're, friends on Facebook, you can see that. And I might stick it up some more places too. I may even put that in the show notes. So having fun with drones, doing some tower inspections. Been talking to a couple of other engineers in the Northeast about doing that. In fact, we're going to have a guest coming up probably after NAB, an engineer from the Northeast who is doing or wants to do some of the same things. Got some ideas about that. So we'll explore that because it's fun. It's cool. Most engineers like flying remote control stuff. So we'll try that out. Hey, let's bring in our guest. Our guest is this awesome engineer from Virginia. His name is Chris Wygal. Chris, welcome into the show.
Hey, guys. Kirk, you were in the mountains last week, and you've since come down, and you did shave for the show, so we do appreciate that. When you asked me to do this, I said, well, did he shave? And you did, so I said, sure, let's do this.
We don't want to do a show with an unshaven Kirk. Man, that's really bad.
No, not at all.
In fact,
right?
I got a little makeup on the behind the scenes, more than most people want to know. got some makeup on because I really nicked myself this morning. And worse than that, I cut myself shaving because I was in a hurry. Why? To go to the dentist. And what's the first thing the dentist does? He's all over your mouth.
Right.
So
exactly.
my dentist had to say, here's some tissue to put on that.
Was it some sort of mountain man knife that you were shaving with, or was it an actual razor?
No, it was a razor. It was just a good. Okay. It was a Harry's razor. I don't know if they're an advertiser on this network or not. Not on our show, but it was a Harry's razor.
Heard good things about them though.
Yeah, I like them. So tell us about Chris Wygal. Why are you on the show, Chris?
I don't know. Let's see. Let's go back to the early 2000s. Was at Liberty University as a communications student and worked part-time for both of their radio stations. At the time, it was a campus student thing, and there was a 50,000-watt station right here in Lynchburg, Virginia, that serves Central Virginia. And just a student, at the time, they didn't really have a full-time engineer working on site, and the contractors would come and go. And so as a part-time student, just walking in, doing what part-time students do, run the board, that type of thing, I would see a technical need and address it and fix it. And pretty soon the general manager said, "Hey, wait a minute, this kid, what's going on here?" And it came time to graduate. Yeah, came time to graduate. And he said, "What are you going to do for a living?" I said, "Well, I have no idea. I've got a communications degree. I have no idea what I'm going to do for a living." But he said, "Would you like to be an engineer?" I said, "Yeah, let's do that for a year or two, get some experience and see what happens." That's been 15 years ago now. And Liberty University right here in Virginia has made it worth my time to stay. I've really enjoyed working here. That flagship station I was talking about has now become 20 stations. It's a conglomeration of full powers and translators around Virginia and North Carolina. So it's really grown up, and we're reaching lots of people. It's lots of fun.
Very cool. And somehow you gained a lot of technical expertise along the way. So I'm going to guess a lot of that was through just on-the-job training and finding out what works and what doesn't. Am I kind of right about that?
That's exactly right, because people say, "Well, did you study broadcast engineering or some sort of engineering in college?" I said, "No, not really. It was a learn-on-the-fly type of thing." And like I said a minute ago, the fact that it's a blessing and a curse. A lot of guys, I think, and you can probably speak to this, come up in engineering working under someone who's been doing it for 40 years. I didn't have a lot of mentors. So there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of how does this work? I need to figure it out because we have to make it work on the air like now. So it was a trial by fire type thing. And not a lot of there wasn't a lot of instruction of someone saying, "Here's how this works." I had to learn a lot of things on my own. Now, there was a lot of help. There were people around that I could call and have some resources, but not right there with me. So it was the first few years was a lot of learning going on because you just had to. And then after that, once I became more comfortable with the way this industry works, you could take some time and say, "Okay, let's think about what we're doing here and put in some neat things."
It sounds like you have your learning experience and has a lot in common with Chris Tobin's and with mine and with a whole lot of engineers. And tell you what, we're gonna save the story for just a minute from now. But you have a special expertise in sports broadcasting and getting great audio, picking up great audio for that. We'll as well as studio audio. We'll get to all that in just a minute. Our show is brought to you in part by the folks at Lavo. Now, most of you know me, Kirk Harnack, as the broadcast engineer, kind of a goofy on-air personality, and the host of this show. Well, what you may not know is, 11 years ago, the folks at Telos decided that they would make me the international sales manager. And so I started traveling all around the world. What an eye-opener. Traveled all around the world, seen a lot of broadcasting in a lot of countries. And, oh, my goodness, Germany and Latvia and Australia and New Zealand and India and China and, Taiwan. It was all over Taiwan, hopefully going back. Singapore, Poland, and the list goes on and on. South Africa, the list goes on and on. But I really got to see a lot. And it's fascinating to see the different ways that broadcasters do business, the way they get their programming to work. And that's why I'm excited to introduce you to our sponsor, Lavo. That's LAWO.com. Now, they're famous around the world for television audio and video, especially for, those high-profile events like the Olympics, the Grammy Awards, World Cup soccer. When the broadcast is mission-critical, you're very likely to find a Lavo console there. Now, you wouldn't believe how this stuff is built. It's truly over-engineered, a lot of redundancy, because there are no do-overs in live event broadcasting. Dead air really can kill your career. I went to one country where dead air would absolutely kill your career. You'd be sweeping the streets if you had more than a few seconds of dead air in one place I went to. Now, you may be thinking, why should I care about this? Because I'm not doing TV or I'm not doing the Olympics. Well, radio guys hate dead air even more than TV people do. And that's why broadcasters like the BBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corp, and NPR, to name a few, buy Lavo radio consoles. Yeah, they have a line of radio consoles. So being involved in TV and radio around the world means that Lavo is thinking a lot about the future. Everybody knows that all types of media are converging onto a common IP delivery platform. Lavo is ready for that with broadcast gear that handles audio, video, and control of every studio device using a single off-the-shelf computer network. And after that, well, virtualization is coming along. Broadcasting from the cloud, that probably means fewer wires for you and me, and Lavo is already building those tools too. So if 5 nines of uptime, bulletproof reliability, and really being future-proof are important to you, then please find out about Lavo. Now, here's a special website you can go to, and yes, me and Chris Tobin and maybe even Chris Wygal will get a little bit of credit for this. It'll make us look good. So check it out at lavo.com/TWiRT, TWiRT. So lavo.com, and please add the /TWiRT, though. Let them know that you stopped by and looked at their radio consoles and lots of other cool things, too. Check out their, they have a new system they're bringing out. I just saw a press release about their new relay system. Interesting as well. Thanks, Lavo, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, Chris Tobin is along in a studio. Chris, I see a console there in front of you. It looks a little old. Is that an analog studio?
Well, it's analog digital. It's got a couple of CD burners. It's got a Pro Tools machine behind me. There's a DVD player. That's digital. Mini disc. That's digital. The console is, yes, it's analog. It's a PRNE. It's a classic. It's a Radio Mixer 28. Yeah. Now that Wheatstone has purchased the assets of PRNE, I can actually get this serviced. I can get the parts, the classic switches, the nice fat buttons, the mechanical. That sound that people miss.
Well, does that one click, or were you pushing that extra hard to kind of make a click?
No, it clicks. It clicks.
Okay. Yeah, I thought well, some manufacturers look for clickless buttons, don't they?
Well, I mean, it clicks, but it's very, quick. I have the microphone right on top of it, but if a properly balanced microphone in the studio environment, I'm sure you wouldn't hear it.
Those PRNEs are so amazing, and I've installed plenty of lesser consoles, as I'm sure you have. In my day. In fact, Chris, one big difference in your career and mine, I always worked in small market radio, and so I look at the whole IP audio thing and working with my friends at Telos and Axia. I look at that from a small market point of view and how it's a blessing for small markets. You look at it from a big market point of view. I never touched a PRNE console. I've never used one, ever. I just look at them when I go visit stations.
Well, I worked in small markets, and we had Sparta consoles. People Sparta? What? No, I'm not Spartacus, but it's Sparta. Yes, we had Sparta consoles. And then there was the CCA consoles. And then what were the other ones we had? We had a couple others that were doozies that, if you looked them up, you're like, wow, that really didn't work, did it? No, they tried. You know what you don't realize in the business, and if you've been around long enough, you can appreciate it. Those of you listening and watching who've come in the last, say, 10 years, PRNE, Pacific Recorders Engineering, Jack Williams, the founder, what he did was, yes, he made a great console. It was a great color. It had a nice layout. It was a certain style. It was almost, actually, when you think about it, it was the Apple of its day, because you basically bought a PRNE console and you did not connect anything to it directly without a conversion box. Remember those little silver boxes? You want to do a card interface, the CI2s. You want to do a turntable or any device that connects to the console had to go through their little adapter that you purchased to make the interface work. But he developed a workflow, a design that you can mimic anywhere you went in your organization. So say you're a small station, a group of stations in a region, and you had the wherewithal to buy the low-end cost but high-quality PRNE console. You could buy 6 of them, know exactly what you're going to get in the 6 locations you install it. Or you could buy 2 of them in your one location and know exactly what you're going to get. And that's what he that's what he instilled in people. That's what became the standard. When somebody says, "Oh, you got PRNE," You have a certain workflow ethic. You have a certain layout design. Fast forward to today, I've got a smartphone. Well, which one do you have? Is it the big A or the little a, Apple or Android? And that dictates where you go in the room and what people do and talk to you, right? That's what Jack Williams did. And then you have, think about it. The big names of the day, McCurdy, Ward Beck, PRNE. Do you recall any others that were the big names? If you worked at a major network, which consoles did you work with? McCurdy, Ward Beck, and probably PRNE in different affiliate locations.
Yeah.
And that's what Jack did. That's what started it, and that's where we are today. And Lavo does the exact same thing. They do the same exact thinking, same approach, but they just use today's technology.
So I got to ask Chris Wygal. Chris, I believe you told me earlier you've got some Wheatstone consoles in your facility, right. and I saw some other console you're using out on remote at the sports venues. I'll ask you about that in a minute. What did the Wheatstone consoles replace?
Wheatstone.
Oh, okay. So you previously had Wheatstone with some analog consoles?
They were the D75s.
Oh, okay. The digital D75. Gotcha.
Ran those for about 7 or 8 years, and then prior to that, I think it's an A50 that had wooden sides and was beige in color, and it was bulletproof. And those things actually still ran perfectly, but they just looked horrible because they'd been abused for so many years. And we finally said, let's upgrade. And the D75 was a good change because it put us in the digital world. We could still keep our analog stuff and run some digital sources and digital out. And then we eventually said, let's just do AOIP and finish the deal.
So we're kind of on the subject of consoles for just a minute, and someday we just need to do a whole show on consoles. Chris, we got Chris Tobin. We need to figure out a person to bring in about that, maybe a couple of guests to bring in. But anyway, although between you and me, we have a lot of experience ourselves. I just wanted to note that I think I mentioned this before, that in small town America, where I was typically engineering, we skipped the whole AES EBU era completely. Because we would always buy the bottom of the line analog consoles until AOIP came along, which is all digital and competes very well and is remotely accessible. And so we went from analog right into the AOIP world and skipped the AES world completely. And I wonder how many people were in that boat as well. We just never went digital for digital's sake. We just went to the next thing that didn't cost very much. Chris Wygal or the other Chris Tobin? Which Chris Wygal? What's your you guys went through the AES period a bit if you had the D75 consoles.
Right. I have heard a lot of what you said, that people sort of skipped that era and said, you know what, and there's even some conglomerates in this market who haven't quite gone AOIP yet, and they are still hanging on to their analog stuff. So sure. I think what you said is accurate. They may have just held on to the analog as long as it was working. And then when everything switched over to IP, they said, okay, now's the time to do a big conversion. And the thing about audio over IP, and it doesn't really matter who makes it, it is scalable. You can do one room at a time if you'd like. I do know of a facility down the road that's got the same thing going on. They've got in their case, a blade in their NOC, and just one room at a time, just working until they've got their whole AOIP system in place.
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. It's very, very doable like that. Hey, I'll tell you what, it's 20 minutes in. Let's get to the subjects that we were going to talk with Chris Wygal about. And I've been promoting this notion about you, Chris, and sports. And you posted some picture somewhere that had a boom and a microphone, and you promised, I can make 20,000 people sound like 60,000 people. I don't know that I know the difference. So tell us about your sports, engineering, sports broadcast engineering, and kind of, take us through that and what you've learned about that, and maybe a trick or a secret or two along the way.
Well, that's what I get for making crazy claims on social media. now I've got to prove how I can make 20,000 people sound like 60,000 people. Actually, I think we've been pretty successful at that. The history is Liberty University started playing, they were on the field playing sports in 1971 when they were founded by, of course, Jerry Falwell. He had a vision of making sure that Liberty, at the time, Lynchburg Baptist College, would be competitive athletically. Well, fast forward to today, Liberty just became an FBS football program. And so we're going to see our stadium expanded, and it already seats 20,000 people. What we've always run into is at the scale Liberty University played football, we would be in crowds of 2,000, 3,000, maybe play up a weekend, you'd see 20, 30,000. Our opening game last year was at Virginia Tech, so that was 60,000 people. So it's not hard to make that sound like 60,000 people because it was, in fact, 60,000 people. But generally, it's a smaller crowd. And in our facility, there's seats about 20, 21,000, and they do pack it out. But there's nothing worse to me than listening to college football, and it sounds like a picnic. And I learned early on, back in 2003 or 4, when I first started traveling with our play-by-play man, he wanted to have an engineer with him. You'll see this a lot. You'll see the shotgun crowd mics either for a TV broadcast or radio. They'll be down right in the crowd, and generally 8 or 10 feet from people. And unless you use about 15 or 20 of those mics, you're going to hear, the 5 or 10 people that are closest to that microphone. And I think that's where people go wrong with their mic placement. What I began doing was, first of all, we always did the games in stereo. Second of all, it occurred to me, let's put the mic as far away from the crowd as we can, and that way you obviously hear the whole stadium. And as odd as it seemed, people would always get annoyed with me because I would want to scale a press box and put mics up on top of the press box instead of just down hanging out of the window like you would at most press facilities. Yeah. And basically, the picture that you saw on Facebook was yet another effort to make sure our microphones are 20 feet at best away from the crowd. And we put 6 mics in the stadium, so it does help displace hearing one person. But that picture of that microphone that stand was an augmented speaker stand with another 20-foot Shure light stand on top of it, and it was bolted together. It puts the mic 24 feet off the ground, and that's kind of the thing with miking a crowd like that. If you don't have a lot of people, if there's a crowd of 8 or 10,000 people, if you get the mics far enough away, it really makes it sound like a bigger audience.
So tell me about the mics that you're using at the top of these booms that are far away. And I take it they're far away, but yet pointed back at the crowd.
Right.
What are the technical details?
It sort of is a little counterintuitive. They're 15-inch shotguns, and they're great. They're Audio-Technica shotgun mics. $300-400 mic. We didn't really want to buy a higher end anything more than that because a lot of times these microphones end up getting rained on. So if we run crowd effects mics, we don't want to have a really, really, really nice shotgun out there. So we stay in the $200-400 range with Audio-Technica. I think it's an 815B, maybe something like that. And we've got 6 of those mics. And you would think you'd want to XY the things like you're supposed to do a microphone. In this case, just splaying the microphones out left and right over a crowd works really well. It gives you a true representation of who's sitting in the stands. And we do that in 3 different places around the stadium, and it seems to work really well. It's actually very simple, not a really highly technical microphone scheme. Just stick the mics up and point them at the crowd, and there you go.
Yeah. One little bit left, one little bit right. So,
right. Yeah.
Are you using some? I would imagine that stadiums are oftentimes pretty windy. What do you use for a wind cover?
Interestingly enough, the foam that you've got on your microphone there is not quite enough, but we have found that, and that's all we've got. But we've found that if you just there's no low response in a crowd. So I generally roll the mic off up to about 200 hertz, and that gets rid of the rumble. Because clapping and screaming is, everything above that, so you don't miss much by rolling off the wind noise.
That's good. I never really realize that. There's not much bass energy in clapping and screaming, is there?
Right.
Okay.
Now, one thing our play-by-play man likes is if we go to a big stadium that's got a big sound system, of course you can hear it thumping all through the stadium. He likes to hear that on the air underneath him. So there has to be a little bit of an exchange, but generally speaking, yeah, just roll the wind noise off and you can't even actually hear it.
Who's doing the mixing on these games? You or somebody else?
That would be me. We looked into what consoles we needed. Back in the day, I needed 6 channels. Then it became 14. Now I've got a 24-channel console that is full for a football broadcast because we have so many headsets. Of course, the crowd miking. We take a feed from a truck if there is one, and of course, so we can get the parabolic mics. So we use a 24-channel PreSonus 2442, and the reason I purchased that console was because it's got 10 aux sends, and we run the Studio Technologies talent boxes. You'll see those on TV a lot, but we use those. So everyone wants a separate aux feed. So that these aux feeds are starting to add up. I look at the Personas console and say, hey, there's 10 of these things. So that was a plus. And it has a talkback feature, which obviously you need in the middle of a game. And it's a digital console, too, so everything you would need. I used to have about a 30-pound rack full of, what have you got, processors and a lot of outboard equipment, just, some EQs. The handy-dandy, the trusty compeller was in there. But when you have a digital console that's got so much processing in it, it freed things up, and now we've got a much less of a footprint when we show up. It's a 24-channel board and it's completely full, and I'm already actually talking to them saying, hey, we may need to go with a 32-channel console coming up soon, because we just keep adding so many inputs to this broadcast.
Now, you have other crowd mics around the stadium. How do you get that audio back to your console? You got long wires, or is this wireless?
Believe it or not, I've had so many TV people laugh at this, and because when a TV truck shows up at the stadium, they show up with about 7,000 feet of cable, if not more.
Yeah,
and
not more.
What I do is I've got the Shure ULX system, and so if we, in the case that let's say we go, well, let me go back. Our home stadium is pre-wired. They've got it set up so ESPN can show up with the truck and have all the resources they need. But if we do go to a smaller school that doesn't have any tie lines around the stadium that we can use, stick a microphone up in front of the crowd, put a Shure belt pack on it, and usually sweep the stadium for frequencies, make sure we're good, and jump on an open frequency and get it back. And you've got the two big wireless paddles for the receivers up there, and that's how we do that. We've got four wireless channels we can use.
So that's pretty cool. By the way, the wireless system that you mentioned, is that some kind of a digital audio, or is that an analog FM system? Oh, it's digital.
It's digital. I'm terrible with these things. Actually, you and I talked earlier. When it comes to specifics and model numbers, I'm terrible. It's like, what do you use for your wireless system? I don't know. It's made by Shure, I think. But we're in the 500 megahertz, 560. Does that sound about right?
Sure, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a good start.
Okay. Yeah, actually, we should ask. Yeah, Chris is here. Chris Tobin.
Right.
Cool.
Just put these belt packs on these things, and we've really never had any problem. Again, the digital systems are the bandwidth is so tight on those things, you can really cut through some noise and have a lot of success in just about any stadium, unless you're downtown. The biggest market we've played in is right outside of Atlanta. It was pretty noisy down there. Is that right? No. We've played in on Long Island at a couple of the schools up there too, and it was really nasty RF environment there. But generally speaking, the ULX4 system from Shure works very well.
How do you get the batteries to last long enough on those?
Believe it or not, they last for a 6-hour broadcast, and they're generally about dead when we get them back up to the press box to pack up and to go home. But the batteries do last for an entire show, which is in our case about 6 hours. I was really concerned about that because everything takes AA batteries. And when we first started, some people said, well, how are we going to change the batteries on these things right in the middle of a football broadcast? So we're going to find out. And they seem to last pretty well. The one that does run out is we have the same belt pack on our sideline, man. And I think it's because maybe you can answer this, Chris or Kirk. That battery does run out before the crowd mics do. And it's on his belt. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out, unless maybe he's talking into it more and we're asking more from it. But it does run out before a broadcast is over. But the crowd mics don't. They seem to stay pretty steady.
We used when I was doing TV weather, we did a morning show that was 5 hours long, and the batteries would die after about 2.5 hours. That's all we got. Wow. But they were 9-volt rechargeables. So we went through a whole lot of them every morning. Chris Tobin, what do you know about battery life in these things?
Well, it depends on the manufacturer. I use Electrosonics a lot. Oh, sorry, it's a windscreen. Otherwise known as a dead cat. It's the dead cat windscreen.
That's what I need right
Come on now. Come on. Everyone in the audience knows what this is. But then again, it could be a tribble. It might be a tribble, but it's not.
I thought it was a Muppet.
Well, yeah, it's a hairy Muppet. See, this is here's the microphone. There you go. See, shotgun microphone, and then you place the dead cat on that, and you'll probably see them at sporting events, NASCAR, things of that sort. See, there you go. This is the Daniel Boone version. Notice it looks like a raccoon. All right.
How's the dead cat doing in the rain, though? Because I think Chris Wygal said that the rain can be a problem.
Well, see, that's the thing. If you put in a stereo situation, if we were to put two dead cats like that on top of my stand that I created, the top of the it might topple over because it would become waterlogged and weigh about 40 pounds up there.
Well, actually, that particular one I just showed you, this Audio Technica mic that's in here is a stereo shotgun.
There we go.
There's the XLRs. There's two XLRs, left and right.
Right.
Huh.
Okay, so this is a stereo shot, so you could actually, and it's pretty cool. You can change the pattern. But yeah, so that's the dead cat, and that is the terminology. If you're a A1 or an A2 on set, they'll know exactly what you're talking about. If you're out there doing boom work, if you're a boom operator, and they ask you for the dead cat, you give them the dead cat without the legs. But to answer your question with the wireless mics, there's probably a good chance. Two things with wireless mics, the transmitters, especially body packs. Two things. If the microphone gain is up high and you're talking into it a lot at various levels, that does draw more current. And the other thing is with body packs, because your body, unfortunately, changes the impedance of the transmitter, the antenna, the way it works. And that will cause the final stage or the amplifier stage, the RF, to work harder. So that will draw more current. I've used Electrosonics. I think Shure does it now. I'm not sure. I have to look at their new ones. But the Electrosonics I've used gives you battery voltage back at the receiver, so you can get a heads up as you can watch it drain. And it's like IFB transmitters. I use IFB transmitters a lot, the body packs, and a lot of the guys love to crank them. Well, that kills the battery. I usually purchase the Duracell, the lithiums. Cost you a little more, or Everready, the Energizer lithiums, gives you a little more life out of them. I've been able to stretch about 8 hours out of my packs, but typically 6 to 7 is what I get. But they work well.
Good deal. Hey, Chris Wygal. So we just a couple minutes before we take another break. I don't do much and haven't done much in terms of sports broadcasting. If I were going to have to fill in for you one day, what advice would you be giving me about the setup and then the mix itself? What would be your advice for someone you're training to take your place for a weekend?
Oh, no. That's a tough one.
Okay. Well, your top 3 tips then.
Oh, let's see. I'll tell you this. The hardest part of the broadcast is going to be making sure the talent can hear everything they need to hear and they're happy. Getting even a stereo mix, bringing all the sources in, putting that on the air, and writing all the faders or using compression to make sure everything's nice and tight. That's the easy part. The truth is, any live sound man would probably tell you this too. The hardest part of the show is making sure everyone's headset mix is correct, and that's where you will get the most complaints. Generally speaking, everyone at home is happy with what they hear, but the talent is they're particular. Which, and you can't blame them. They don't want those sort of distractions in their head. Hey, the crowd's too noisy. I can't even hear myself think. Or the return from the station's too loud. So, with those aux feeds, we have to adjust all of that. That's going to be the hardest part. I would tell a trainee, and I would say, look out for these guys. They're particular about what they want to hear, and as well they should be. So you have to make them happy. That's going to take up a lot of your time. The second part they need to be, and we haven't talked about this yet, but the backhaul to the studio, and we use Comrex Access for that. Make sure you're monitoring that at all times and watching for network errors, because if things start to get squirrely, you need to be on your toes either to switch to a backup or have some sort of plan in place, and to watch the telemetry on that. You asked for a third. Don't let the microphones get wet. If it starts to rain, put a dead cat or a plastic bag on them or something. But really, the talent is the tough one. Keeping everyone happy for the run of the show is pretty tough. Our pregame show has 7 guys, and 3 are downstairs. The rest of them, one may be down on the sidelines. One, some may be up in the booth. So there's people everywhere, and keeping everyone happy and when they're all in different rooms is it's a challenge.
That's interesting that you mentioned about this. It's really critical to have that the talent can hear what they need to hear. Sounds like you're trying to really avoid any Mariah Carey moments.
Yeah, because even they're not necessarily singing along with a soundtrack. Now we do have some divas. I hope they're not watching this, but yes, we do have some divas on our broadcast.
Of course.
Right, but they anything can be a distraction to these guys. So you really have to be careful with what they're hearing, and they will let you know if they don't like what they hear. They will let you know for sure.
Absolutely true.
Chris, you've dealt with some diva talent. What's your advice regarding? I mean, how is an engineer? An engineer doesn't, unless you arrange for something, you don't hear what they're hearing. Whereas Chris Wygal, you alluded to the broadcast mix. You hear. That's what you're doing. That's what you're monitoring. But
right.
the individual mix to each of the talent, as you call them, their aux feeds.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know what they're hearing?
Well, Chris Wygal. I know.
Oh, no, Chris Tobin, go right ahead. I've talked enough.
Okay, that's fine. Well, first of all, the broadcasts I've done and the mixes that we have, and I will say this, that I work with very talented announcers, broadcasters, however you want to call it. And if you'd like to use the term diva or ego, fine. But this is my policy. Their name is on the marquee. So as long as their name is on the marquee, they can be as whatever they like. I just make it clear to them that I'm on their side. And that's when they notch down or turn down the divaness, if you will, or the ego. The trick is what I do in my particular setups and drives friends of mine crazy. I actually transmit my own mix minus that they're hearing in their headsets to me. So I'm carrying two things. One, the broadcast mix receiver and the IFB mix. So I know if somebody at a remote location down on the field, or in the case of spoken word, we're doing a talk show, and a remote feed coming in is noisy, I'll know right away to expect probably an intercom hit. Hey, I don't know what's going on with so-and-so, but I can't make it out, and fix it now. I can be sort of, if you will, self-aware of it. It's a preemptive strike, and that's what you have to do in these events, and especially in a remote broadcast. I treat it like a chess game. I'm always looking 3 moves ahead, and that keeps the folks with the name on the marquee at bay. And if you do it right, do it 2 or 3 times with the same group, and I'm sure Chris goes through this with his sportscasters, they become comfortable and know that if you're on the show or you're on the event, they don't bother. They know that it's taken care of. And that's what you should strive for.
Right. That's on that console I was mentioning a second ago. You can cue or listen to the aux feed. So if during a break someone takes a headset off and says, "Hey, I'm really having a problem with such and such," or "I need to hear more of whatever," I can then, like you said, cue what they're listening to. And one thing we've got that's really really messy is the studio technology system is a 2-wire IFB system. So you've got that. We've got 2 talkback channels, and then they're also getting an aux mix. So they're able to talk amongst themselves, depending on which button they push is who they can talk to specifically. We sort of have an all call or a talent call. That's the way the channels are set up. But then they've got the aux feeds they listen to. And then, like you said, I'm listening to the return from the studio. Plus, I've got the sideline man in queue. So there's the point I need to make to the trainee you were talking about, Kirk. Be prepared to have a headset full of noise and to not really necessarily to be able to enjoy the broadcast because you've got so much to listen to.
That's a good point.
You shouldn't be enjoying the broadcast.
Yeah,
right.
You should not be. Yeah,
that's not the goal. You think of it like this: you're watching the presidential motorcade go by, or maybe the mayor's motorcade, or the governor, and you notice those guys with the little earpieces, dark glasses. They're not looking at the motorcade; they're looking at the crowd. That's what you got to do. You got to look at the broadcast, not listen to the outcome. You got to look at the other way.
Well, it's interesting too in the case of maybe it's just me, but people always come up after the game and say, later in the week, "Hey, how did their passing game look?" Or how about, what so-and-so lineman, how did he do? I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I am a football fan, but oddly enough, I know nothing about our guys on the field because my job is to keep the broadcast running. And as I've said already, we've got a pretty complex system going on for what we do. So yeah, like you said, it's hard to enjoy the show because I guess you're making the show happen, as it were.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. It's not easy. It's same for talk shows or news remotes. And I've done plenty of breaking news events where it's throw in the mix, go and make it happen, and that's it. And then afterwards, somebody comes up to you and goes, "So what happened?" And you're like, "To be honest with you, I haven't a clue. There was a lot of blood, a lot of screaming, and that's about all I can tell you."
Hey, folks, you are watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode number 341. Chris Tobin is along, and I'm Kirk Harnack, and Chris Wygal is along with us as well. He is the operations manager over at The Journey Radio Network in Virginia from Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. Chris has more advice for us on studio microphones coming up. And actually, as we roll into this ad for BSW, and hey, listeners, don't tune away. This is good stuff because I'm gonna involve Chris Wygal in this in just a second. He doesn't know it. Chris Wygal, what is the microphone you're using there?
It is an RE20.
It's an RE20. That's right. And guess what, friends? RE20s are on sale right now at BSW, Broadcast Supply Worldwide. Why? Because it's microphone mania all through the month of March, and you have a few more days, but hey, you could even call them or order online tonight if you're listening live before before 7 p.m. Eastern time, and it can ship today if it's in their warehouse. It can ship out today. The reason it's Mic Mania, and one reason is because there are some microphones in this world that are going to experience a price increase. And you can get right now up to 61% off select microphones and mic bundles. So that RE20 that Chris Wygal is using, and RE320, and the RE27ND, these are all on sale with mic package discounts. You get the microphone, you get the RE pop filter, the 309A shock mount, and a BSW broadcast XLR cable. These are all on sale. Check their website, call them if you like, and get a deal on these because these prices, I'm told, just like that, really, really, really won't be available after the end of March. Now, they also have pricing on discounts on other microphones, 10% off a Yellowtech IXM Pro microphone bundle. Promo code is YELLOW, put in all caps, YELLOW, for the Yellowtech IXM Pro mic. If you're looking for maybe an Audio Technica BP40 broadcast mic package, it's $349. That includes the mic, windscreen, shock mount, and cable. If you like the Heil PR40, like I do, that's on sale. $349 gets you the microphone, the PR SMB shock mount, the RE pop filter, the HB1 boom arm, and an XLR cable. Now, what about mic processing? Chris Wygal will have some thoughts on this, but I like the DBX 286S. That's the one that I use. It's it is $30 off. Okay, $30, whatever they have. And BSW's got great discount prices. It's an extra $30 off. They can ship later than anyone, up to 7 p.m. Eastern time for any item in stock from their Ohio warehouse. It is located literally a few yards away from a massive airport, and they get stuff shipped out of there late at night. BSW understands the importance of getting your audio through loud and clear. And whether you're a big radio empire, a small or medium station cluster, an LPFM, a podcaster, or a voiceover artist, they're really dedicated to helping you find the right gear. They've been in business since 1973. So, hey, you think BSW is a fly-by-night company? Been around a long time and a lot of items in stock. So check them out. You can go to the website, bswusa.com. bswusa.com. If I were you, I'd just bookmark that. And you get free ground shipping on any order over $99. So all the stuff that I just mentioned, it's over $99. You get free ground shipping on that. And, of course, their catalog is famous. You get on their mailing list, you get the catalogs. Website's great. I mean, what could be better? And I got to tell you, I want to give a big thank you to BSW because Brian Seeley at BSW has made arrangements for us to have a very cool guest on our show coming up, I believe just after NAB. I'm going to keep it a secret for now, but it's an amazing artist, a talent guy, the kind of guy that his name's on the marquee, as Chris Tobin says. So we're going to keep him happy, and he's going to talk to us about microphones as well. All right, so thanks a lot, BSW, for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. And remember, it is Microphone Mania at BSW only for March. You can order today. You can order till the end of March, but do order because if you want a microphone, because you're going to get a good deal. They even have the microphone that Chris Tobin's using. They have this microphone, which is the Sennheiser MKH416. Yeah, for all your microphone needs, as we don't like to say in radio. There you go. Chris Wygal, I think you have a little BSW item that you wanted to show and tell with us as well.
Oh, I don't have it right here with me, but I did have the BSW coffee mug, and earlier when Kirk and I were talking, I held it up to him, and I got that coffee mug from John Lynch. And what's interesting about John is I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia, and it was founded by a man in the 1700s whose name was John Lynch. Oh. And I took a picture of John Lynch Street or Boulevard, whatever it is, Avenue, and I sent it to John Lynch at BSW. And a couple years later, he made a point to come to Lynchburg and stand in front of that sign and let me take his picture. And as part of a trade, I got the BSW coffee mugs and the little candies that they put with everything too. Those things are great.
I've been friends with John Lynch for 20 plus years. He's an amazing guy, and he's a sports announcer himself.
Yeah. Lots of fun. I mean, we had a great time. Went to lunch, and just him being in Lynchburg, Virginia, made his day. It was best thing that happened to him.
That's awesome. All right, so we're going to talk. We're going to shift a little bit, pivot to studio considerations for microphones. Chris, maybe you have some opinions on acoustics, and you also have opinions on mic preamps, and don't mention it because we're going to save it for the end of the show. You have a tip of the week that is pretty cool. I did not know about this, and I'm going to keep it a secret, and you keep it a secret too until the very end of the show. So if kind of talk to us about your philosophy on broadcast, voices, microphones, how we pick that up, and how you end up getting a great sound from the announcer's mouth out to the transmitter. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, when you and I set this up, I may have mentioned that there's we don't really use any special tricks that no one has ever seen before, but there are a couple of considerations that I've always, no matter what sort of processing is in the chain, that I've always tried to do. And this probably would go to that young broadcaster that you were mentioning a little bit ago, who's going to fill in for me on the weekend. If he ends up in the studio, I would tell him this. Obviously, keep your signal chain clean, of course. The rooms that we've designed here in this studio everything is skewed. There's not a square room in the building. And that helps with the resonant modes and everything in the corners. We go floor to ceiling with the treatment, and I'll think of the name of the stuff in a second. They're in Richmond, Virginia. As far as the microphones go, and as far as getting that sound on the air that you were talking about, we do happen to have an Omnia 9, and that box is pristine and loud, and just it smokes the market out of the box. But one thing I did, and I mentioned this to Kirk earlier, I took the laptop out to my vehicle and spent hours upon hours upon hours listening to an average sound system. I didn't want to put myself on a nice set of speakers that we knew would pull out all the good nuance and everything in the broadcast. Sat in my car, sat in my wife's car, sat in the production director's car, just took the laptop outside and played with that Omnia 9 until I was so tired of that Omnia 9, and it was probably very much tired of me as well. Started with a country preset, and the music we do here is far from country, but basically started with that because I like the way country music sounds on the radio. I think whatever they're doing with country music sounds good. I said, okay, let's start with country, and a lot of people will say, don't squash your audio. That'll create listener fatigue. But if you get a good box like the Omnia 9, I have broken a few rules with that thing. We are driving it pretty hard. Really putting a lot of audio into that thing, and it's just smart enough to say, "Hey, look here, you're killing me." But I'm going to. It's got I think the feature is called undo. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Undo.
And especially the way music is recorded these days, it's the waveform looks like a brick. There's not a lot of dynamic range in music anymore, and of course, then we want to process on top of that. The Omnia 9 is smart enough to look at that waveform and say, "Ooh, let's undo some of that processing so we can do what we want to do to it and not become a listener fatiguing situation." I think without getting terribly scientific, because I don't know how all of the algorithms that are inside of that box work, but just taking the time to not be afraid to drive it pretty hard, not be afraid to hit some final clipping pretty hard. But at the same time, tweak everything behind it so you're not driving into that hard band or that hard clipper. One thing I think that people do, and you guys could probably speak to this better than I can. I've watched a lot of multi-band processors work when I visit another facility, and whether it's 5 or 7 or however many bands you've got, they seem to be pretty buried. And I'll get back in the car and listen to that and think, that's a really squashy sound. And what I've done with this Omnia 9 and several processors before that here at this network and then for some other stations is let the multiband do what it needs to do, but don't rely on it so much. I do a lot of the adjusting is in the final clipper. Of course, usually it's just a drive setting, but I'll let the hard limiters do more of the work. Now that can probably be criticized. I'm sure there are some purists who say, "Hey, listen, you're overdriving your air signal. It's making my ears hurt." But we've never had that complaint because one thing, I told you this, Kirk, yesterday, I think, our audience is mostly female. And I guess the word on the street is that females are more apt to experience listener fatigue than men are. So we have to keep that into account. And I would tell the young engineer this too. Ask listeners what they think, and even put the bug in their ear and say, do you ever get tired of listening? How is the audio in your ear when you actually listen to the radio station? Because a listener will usually say, "Oh, I love the music you play. I love your DJs." Well, let's not talk about content. Tell me about the sound of the station. And the biggest word I get from listeners, it's almost like they've all been conspiring to come up with this answer. They say it's open and it sounds like it's in the car with me. I'm like, bingo, that's what we're looking for. I don't want it to be squashed in the speakers. I want it to be in the car with the listener. And I can't take all the credit because the Omnia 9 is a workhorse, beautiful box. But I spent a lot of time with it, making sure that it had a good open sound, but at the same time, not be afraid to drive into some of those final clippers and squeeze some sound out of it.
I want to get Chris Tobin's take on some of that, but first I do want to mention that audio processors, and I'm blessed to work for a company that makes some pretty good ones, including the Omnia 9. Right. Audio processors more and more nowadays have controls presented to the user that are fairly traditional, and yet they may not be doing inside what you think they're doing. And so, yeah, you may have a clipper drive control, and it's doing a lot of things that's not just cranking up a level into some dumb clipper. And I will also clue the audience in a little bit to the fact that with the latest scientific research, and one of our guys is going to be giving a talk on this at NAB, with the latest scientific research, it is now positively amazing the loudness that can be achieved on FM by really smart manipulation of the signal in the composite domain, and it doesn't do a thing to affect the dynamics. It is pure added loudness in several different methods without additional clipping or limiting or anything like that. It's just smart ways to create that composite signal that the listener is eventually going to decode. And I'm writing I wrote a paper about it along with a colleague. He's going to deliver the paper. I put it to paper for him, and it's really amazing. So hey friends, if you've got an audio processor from the 1990s or even the mid 2000s, it's really amazing what we're doing now. And at least I can speak for for my employer. And so what you're experiencing there, Chris, is exactly what the designer of that processor, Leif Clayson, intended for you to experience. Yeah, that you can hit it pretty hard, and it's like, wow, I'm hitting this real hard, and it's still pretty clean. So and what the biggest plus to that box is the stereo phase doesn't disappear, or the separation, I should say. A lot of times, if you squash a box too hard, you just sort of get a muddy, middle-ish type sound. But man, I'll tell you what, if a cymbal or a hi-hat is on the left channel, it is in the left channel in your car as well. It's maybe I shouldn't take any credit for this at all. I think it's just all in that Omnia 9. Mr. Clayson is he did some good work. Well, and now talk about the audio cleanliness before you get into the processor. And one thing I'd like to kind of begin that conversation with is that for as engineers, sometimes we get used to the way things sound, and we actually have to go somewhere else or listen to something else or try something else or take that CD or that cut from the automation system and listen to it somewhere else without the benefit of any other audio processing or bypass them. Anyway, listen to it in a different way to see, hey, is my problem with the source material? I consulted with a station here in Nashville, years and years ago, and they were getting most of their songs from File Donkey. If you remember File Donkey. And, sure, if you want 12-year-olds dubbing your songs, ripping it from CD and who knows what format, a lot of them are mono. Oh, they really were mono. And so we worked through their library and said, now you need to replace these 200 songs with good versions of those. And so talk to me about source material, whether it be a mic or other source material, and maybe how you train your ear to always be acutely aware of what sounds good and there's something amiss with that.
I think that's a very important point, is to not always be listening to the radio, Listen to some good old CDs that, as far as compression is concerned, there's not any compression. But yeah, don't stick to, we like to listen to radio because that's what we do, but our ears get so used to the hard limiting and the just the frankly the brick wall waveform that we form if we were to record our air signal. Yeah, you listen to it before it gets into the radio station system. I've just unplugged my headphones. Hold on a second, and make sure your headphones don't come unplugged too. That helps. Yeah, listen to the source material pure before it goes on the air, and see what the intention was in the studio, and then I guess as you build a format. In this case, we did go through a format change, so I spent a lot of time listening to the library before it made it to the air, saying, okay, here's what the PD wants to put on the air, and this is what came from the studio. So how bad do we want to undo that before it gets into the listener's car? And again, being able to create a nice open sound that's still loud is the goal for this format anyway. I'll tell you about a process we did go through years and years ago. Our music had very little stereo flavor to it at all, and I found out that the guy at the time that was working with the automation system ripped everything into the automation system from CDs, and as it turns out, he was doing an MP3 setting that did The Word Has Left Me, where a lot of the data ends up being put into the middle and
joint stereo, maybe?
Yeah, it was joint. Yeah, joint stereo. So we were losing so much stereo information, and it was driving me crazy. I thought it was a signal chain problem. I thought, what have I got going on here? And because again, we'd listen to the CD, and then it makes it to the air and doesn't have any stereo separation. So we went through that process. 480 songs, I think. We had to re-rip into the system, and that made a world of difference. It really made it sound a lot better.
Chris Tobin, you're an expert on this because you've handled this at lots of radio stations. What are your key indicators so that you know where the problems lie to get them the greatest sound on the air?
Well, source material is the first thing I usually check. Source material and what method you're using to feed the audio chain. So let's take the source material, say, coming off CD. CD player going into your console or the desk. Is it AES from the CD to the console in digital form, or is it analog? What's the noise floor going to be on the console? That kind of stuff. Now, the reason I say these things is if you're going to do compression, be aggressive, as Chris pointed out, and do brick wall processing, that little bit of noise floor coming out of your console when you're playing the music is enough to trigger levels that will make you want to reduce what you process because of the overshoots and because of just overall noise is part of the equation. So that's the early stages. The other thing that I do is I actually have a box. I forget what company makes it. Broadcast Tools. I don't think they make it anymore. It demodulates the composite. And what I do is I take a composite feed out of the processor, feed it into this box, and it gives me left and right. So it actually demodulates it before it transmits. And I listen to it, look at it on a waveform on a oscilloscope, and say, okay, let me see what's going on. Look at the clipping, check this out. Okay, good. And get an idea of what it sounds like leaving the processor at the composite level. And then transmit and then listen to it coming off of a tuner or a mod monitor. Be careful with modulation monitors and a standard tuner. Modulation monitors, remember, have a wider bandwidth output and front end. So you're going to hear things on a mod monitor that you probably will not hear on a standard consumer FM tuner or even professional tuner. So keep that in mind when you're listening and doing stuff. So the final analysis should be done on a tuner or receiver that would be typical of an audience person listening to your station. The other thing to consider, and I talked to a gentleman about this, and I've worked on several projects, the bandwidth of your antenna system. Your FM signal, when you transmit it, can be altered, just as Kirk, you pointed out, with the composite tweaking, if you will, and playing with the little digits and numbers and get loudness out of a composite signal, which is a very delicate phase balance pattern. The FM antenna, or the arrangement, if it's a multi-bay or a master antenna system, that can alter the way your signal sounds as well. And I've actually talked to a gentleman who did a paper on this and had audio to prove it, and I've talked to several folks over the years, and I've actually seen it using a network analyzer. So these are all the elements you can take into account. Now, I say this because way back, I work in a small city that doesn't really concern itself about loudness at all. Well, I take that back. But
wait a minute.
Wait a minute. What are you kidding me? Back in 1984. So, yes, back in 1984, a small station came on the air from a small building in Manhattan. They named it the Gorilla Building, and they had this crazy guy at the controls that came up with this processing that just sounded so open, loud, and different than anything on the market at that time, and it just became the new gold standard. It was like all of a sudden the marketplace listened, looked up, and goes, "What is going on here?" And and fast forward years later, that same crazy guy, he's still crazy, still got the hair going all over the place, still has his steam engines at the house, but Frank Foti, the entire process of audio and how you manipulate it has changed tenfold. So as Chris pointed out, maybe some of the settings he did was minor or minimal or max, and the audio quality is unbelievable. And Kirk, as you pointed out, yes, you make that drive on the clipper stage or the fat setting, you turn it from 2 to 7, you think it's doing one thing, but it's really doing something else. I've been reading the manuals of the Omnia processors from day one to the current, and it's interesting that there are some tidbits in the book that actually tell you, so to speak, without giving away secrets, how things work and why these stages do what they do in the settings and what they're actually meant to do. And I've discovered when I set up my Omnia processors, I actually am going in the opposite direction. So instead of going toward a number 11, I'm actually going towards 6 and 7 and 5 in that direction, and found that I can actually get more out of the box with that, because the technology, as you pointed out, Kirk, is so finite, is so precise that you can get away with so much more now because of that. If you had in the early days, let's say you had a cutting edge box or an Optimod or a Texar, there was a little bit of play, tolerance. You have a tolerance on resistors, 10%, 5%, 1%. Well, back in the day, some of these processors, the overshoot tolerance was close to 3, 4, 5%. You have a 5% overshoot at 10 kilohertz. Guess what? You're turning down your overall modulation. You don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
And that's where things have become really cool. And it's like now you can really deep dive into this stuff and make something happen. And that's what that's what I've been doing. We do here in the city. And there's a lot of folks that yes, the red lights are flashing, where the needles are banging away, but yes, you can take a look at the composite signal off the output of a tuner at the DMOD and go, wow, it's a straight line on both the upper and lower. It still sounds good. That's what you get today. But it's subjective, but you'd be surprised. But yes, the newer boxes, it's unbelievable the stuff you can do.
Right.
Friends, you are watching or listening to This Week in Radio Tech, episode 341 with Chris Wygal and Chris Tobin. I'm Kirk Harnack. We've got a final word and a tip that you really won't want to miss coming right up. But right now, my friends at the Telos Alliance have got this great e-newsletter they send out. Here's a message about it.
Not much in the paper today, is there?
Yeah, not much. Seems tough to stay informed,
Like we're missing out on stuff, important stuff.
Yeah, feels like week-old news. Yesterday's stories. Half the tech stuff in here seems out of date by the time I see it.
What Kirk doesn't know is I'm way ahead of everyone else around here. Every Thursday, I get this newsletter in my email. It's Direct Current. The folks at the Telos Alliance publish this.
What Joe doesn't know is I keep one step ahead of the radio guys in this market. Every Thursday, I get Direct Current from the folks at the Telos Alliance. It's a free newsletter about radio engineering, audio, streaming, studios, everything.
Thursday afternoons, we have our department head meeting. I look like a genius, thanks to the knowledge, updates, and advice in Direct Current. Sometimes I wonder if I should tell Kirk about Direct Current. Might help him out.
I wonder if I should let Joe in on my secret. He could use a little help sometimes.
Nah.
Get Direct Current in your inbox every Thursday. Read profiles of engineers and newsmakers in the broadcast community. Get technical pointers putting you and your facility at an advantage. Important industry news and views. Plus, you'll be up to date on Telos, Omnia, Axia, and Zipstream products. It's all here in the Direct Current newsletter. Subscribe online at telosalliance.com/directcurrent. That's telosalliance.com/directcurrent.
I find this e-newsletter really valuable. And sure, there's some Telos promotion stuff in there, but there's also good tips and tricks and good articles. So check it out if you would. Thanks to Telos Alliance for sponsoring This Week in Radio Tech. All right, real quick, we got time for these a couple of quick tips. Chris Tobin, I'm almost sure you have one, but if you will hang on a second, Chris Wygal is going to tell us about something that I knew nothing about until he surprised it with me today. Chris, what you got in the cloud?
Well, it's amazing. Roger Cloud makes microphones. I've got it down here in the rack. I don't think you'll be able to see it, but he also makes a product.
If you took it out, we wouldn't hear you, right?
Exactly right. You're hearing me through it now. So if I take it out, it'd be sort of a kind of
Maybe a
pointless,
downer. Yeah.
What Cloud Microphones has a product called the Cloud Lifter. In this case, it's a 1RU rack-mounted unit that's called the CL4. It has 4 channels in it, and this Cloud Lifter. I write for Radio Magazine, by the way, and they sent me one. I was like, "What's this thing?" A little preamp, and you plug a dynamic or a ribbon microphone into any channel on the Cloud Lifter. Again, this is a 4-channel unit here, and this thing it takes your phantom power, and it gives you, what did we say, Kirk? Anywhere between 20 to 40 dB gain on a dynamic microphone. And in the case of this RE20, in my opinion, the RE20 has fairly low output compared to some other microphones. This thing now has the output of any condenser mic that you'd bring into the studio, and we can get that sort of output from it, but without the added noise floor. So there's not a lot of traditional amplification going on in here. This is how technical I am. The Cloud Lifter reaches into your microphone and pulls out everything good in the microphone and then puts it back into your processor on the other side. How's that for a description?
If I could, I think I can describe it briefly too, at least in terms of I get it. It takes your phantom power. Right. It uses that to be a mic pre, but it's an unbelievably low noise mic pre, lower than what's in your mic processor.
Oh, yeah.
And so it delivers a higher signal, much higher signal to your mic processor, so you can turn it down on the input. You're not bringing up the noise floor that's in your mic processor, and also it does impedance matching with the mic. And not every input on every mic processor does that right, and the Cloud Lifter does that right. And I'm really impressed with the sound that you probably have a great voice anyway, but you're getting a great sound out of that microphone. And you've tried this yourself with and without, and so you believe in what this thing is doing. Right. It's not for condenser mics because it doesn't pass the phantom power on to the mic. It's for dynamic and ribbon mics.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And it makes an RE20 and SM7. Any of your traditional dynamic microphones will perform. And here's the thing, they'll perform with the output and the clarity of a condenser, but still behave like a dynamic mic, so you don't have to worry about your room as much. And we've had a lot of success with the Cloud Lifter. It's been great for our microphones.
I'll put a link in the show notes, and we'll look at that. Chris Tobin, you always have a great tip for us. What you got this week?
Well, this week's tip is going to be, since we're talking about outside broadcasts and remotes, here's what I would recommend. I worked with somebody, about 6 months ago, doing a broadcast, and realized that I must be just too old. When you're doing a remote broadcast setup or whatever, take a folder and take some sheets of paper, legal pad, whatever you want to call it, and write down your assignments on the console, what everything is going to be, what you roughly plan it to be. Write down the various microphones, who's assigned to which microphone. Make sure you have the frequencies of the microphones if you're doing wireless or radio mics. Make sure you have a layout of where things are coming in from. Get an idea of the layout for the actual location you're at. So this way you know when somebody says, I'm at such and such location, you can look at a map or a diagram and go, okay, I know where you are. Also, make sure you have phone numbers, contacts for all the key personnel on site that you may have to reach out to for something like utility power, telecom, access to the facilities, like maybe you have to get down to the field if it's a sport event, or maybe you have to get to a room in a talk show and all of a sudden find out there's a security lock that you can't get past and you and your host are between doors. Things of that nature. Also, label the console. Get yourself some artist tape, the white tape, lay it out, Sharpie, and make sure you label things. And here's why I say this. When the chaos hits the fan, and you suddenly have to start listening to the headphone feed from your talent saying, I don't know what's going on, there's just noise, it's a mess. You need to be able to listen to that return feed, as Chris pointed out. You could solo it out or send the aux to a headphone. Then you have to look down at your setup and go, okay, I'm on source 12. Source 12 is microphone 4 at the goalpost. Oh, wow, okay, here's the problem. Boom. It gets you to a solution quicker. It also clears your head a little bit so you can think about a solution or find a solution for it, or as the old saying goes, work the problem. That's my tip. Document what you're doing. Now, you can do all this in paper, and why do you do that? Because if you do it on an iPad, because everybody loves iPads, and for some reason the iPad can't connect or can't do something, and you got to scroll. Or no, wait a minute, you got to lay out the papers on the table so you can see things in a progression. Then you should do it in the old analog days. Make a PDF of it, put it on your phone, and whatever, keep it handy, but do it that way. That's my tip for the outside broadcast. Document, put it together, and have yourself. If you've worked on productions, it's usually a production book. I mean, that's a standard fare. But I know a lot of stations, a lot of folks don't do that, and all of a sudden it's a mad run to pull out a cable from a mixer and this and that, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I don't know what happened. And before you know it, half the microphones has gone dead because you pulled out the one plug that powers the rack for the wireless mics. No, Chris knows. I guarantee you he's probably seen this or he's heard the stories.
Oh, it happens. Yeah, the power for the whole rig is at the knee of the play-by-play guy, and he kicks it, and everything goes dead. So
yeah,
that one's easy. When the whole rig goes down, just find the power cable.
Right, but at least if you have this, you document this stuff, then you can do a post-mortem and go, okay, what can we do better? Right. See, that's the other reason why you do this. You go through this whole thing, you look at the ups and downs and go, wow, everything was great except blah, 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 blah. Oh, wait a minute. You know what? We could probably have done it this way, and that would avoid that issue. And maybe that's what you want to do, and that's the key. And then you can have great broadcasts. Outside broadcasts could be really good and can make money with them.
You know, you make a good point. I've followed guys who have done some documentation, whether it's putting a list up on a patch panel or something, so you know what's what. But here's another thing to add to what Chris says. If you're going to write notes, write them neatly so I can read them in the middle of the broadcast. They call it a scribble strip on the console, but don't scribble on the thing.
Well, yeah, when you're doing the documentation, double space is okay. The goal is not to fit as much as you can on 8.5 by 11. If you have to have 4 pages, so be it. The goal is, think of it this way. You're at an event. Everything is calm. It's going great. You're sitting there at the console, the mixer, whatever you have set up, and everybody's happy. And all of a sudden, the console flickers, and you've lost 2 microphone feeds from your co-host or your spotters on the field. You need to be able to grab that binder, quickly thumb through the pages, look at that real fast and say, where am I going? What am I doing? Your eyes need to focus. The only way your eyes are going to focus is on something that's double-spaced, not scribbled. And it's important. It's neuroscience. That's actually the way the eyes work. And when you're under panic mode, the brain shuts down and focuses only on one thing. Where do I find that information? How do I get it? Where is it? Where is it? Do the test. Take a book that's very, very fine print and try and find something in a manual. Say for your CD player, iPhone, or whatever, anything. Try and find something real fast. Time it. I guarantee you, if you found this stuff with double spacing, it'd be quicker. And I've done this for years, and it works.
I'm worrying about all caps, double spaced all caps, just like a letter from a Nigerian prince.
Yes.
Believable.
Yeah. But well, maybe not believable, but I can find what I'm looking for, which I'm usually not looking for anything. Hey, we got to go. We got to go. This has been great. Chris, we'd love to have you back again sometime. Chris Wygal. Chris Wygal from Liberty University, the ops manager at the Journey FM radio network. Thanks for joining us so much.
Kirk, I appreciate it. It's been lots of fun. I'll come back someday.
And Chris Tobin, thank you for joining us as well from whatever location you are at there and in the digital analog world.
It's just the jazz station, WPG.
Oh, you're at the jazz station. Yeah, how many? You must have how many studios you got there? Because you're almost always somewhere different.
We do have a lot of studios. We rent them out. We do today. Actually, we had 3 musician groups come in. We also did 2 ISDN talking heads for public station in Boston, station in St. Louis, and we did the BBC. The BBC had some folks come in. So we just happen to be in the right spot. So we got a lot of people that do books and all kinds of topics that talk shows look for, and we're in the right spot for it. So it's busy.
It's great working at a lively radio station where things happen.
It's lively. It's lively. Things do happen here. Trust me.
Thanks very much to Suncast for producing This Week in Radio Tech. And I have a tip for you. That tip is tune in next week. We'll be here on Thursday, our usual day at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And Jim Gray is going to be our guest. Jim is a fabulously interesting guy, an engineer, and that's all I can say. He won't let me say anything else. We'll see how much he's going to tell us. But he's a fascinating guy. You're going to enjoy him. And more guests after that. So tell your friends and tune in next week for This Week in Radio Tech. Also, thanks to Andrew Zarian, the founder of the GFQ network. And here, let me show you my shirt here. See my, ta-da, my Guys from Queens Subway GFQ shirt. You can get your own too. I go online somewhere. I'll put it in the show notes. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye.